Only mode.
Well, hello and welcome to today's HIPAA Chat, Cybersecurity Threats to PHI. I'm Carol Fly with High Tech Answers. We are back once again, as we are each month, for our live Q&A addressing questions on HIPAA. And today we're talking about a pretty sizable topic. HIPAA Chat would not be possible without our sponsor, eFax Corporate. We appreciate their support of the program. They were founded in 1995. They're an award-winning provider of internet services through two divisions, Business Cloud Services and Digital Media. Please check out their website. They have a lot of products that actually can help in this particular area of cybersecurity. Our host, of course, is Steve Spearman of Health Security Solutions. Steve,
hello, everybody.
Hello. In spite of his very youthful appearance, and as we like to say, George Clooney look-alike, Steve has actually been in the healthcare industry since 1991. He must have been about 5 when he started Prodigy. He has a lot of experience in the industry. He's a pretty well-known face. Please check out his monthly webinar series and other events at healthsecuritysolutions.eventbrite.com. And of course, you can email him, and he may be emailing you as well. And with him is Mike Pearson. Mike also is with Health Security Solutions, also a veteran, again, youthful appearance. And it really is just sort of the IT security technical guy here on this conversation. So we're very thankful to have him aboard.
You can call me a geek. That's fine. I'm a security geek for the portion of this conversation.
Mike is a security geek. Yeah. And so, for those of us who have been on HIPAA Chat, you know the format. We took your question during the registration. I'm going to try my best to unmute a couple of you to ask your questions live. We've got a few slides to go over, and then we'll dive right into questions. Real quick, 30 seconds. Steve, I'm going to Lake Como in May. I will say hi to George if I run into him. So.
Please, yes, please do. Yeah. So, tell him I really resent him, leveraging my fame.
Your HIPAA Chat fame.
Whatever. Yeah, my HIPAA Chat fame. Yes, absolutely. So. By the way, just for, kind of division of labor sort of thing, I think it's worth note. So, Mike is, in my practice, he's my technical go-to guy. And so I defer to Mike on the technical. He'll be handling, and this is a more technical kind of discussion topic, but it also impinges on other things. And I'm not a complete, it's like I don't know, it's not like I don't know anything in this area, but so together we will, conquer the world.
A duo,
together.
Yes.
The three of us.
Anthem.
Yes.
Marsha. So everybody's talking about it. Still talking about it. 80 million records.
Yeah, I mean, the scope of the 80 million is an astonishing number of records. It's the prior record was 4.5 million by community health systems. So yes. And I know I think Mike's actually familiar with some of the technical briefs, which I intend to get to, but have not really, done much with it. Mike, what's going on with Anthem?
Yeah, sure, Steve. We don't know 100% of everything at this point. Obviously, it's still an active investigation that's going on. But what the community has been able to glean from this is a few things. So what happened? We talked about that. It was a massive data breach of over 80 million Social Security numbers, as well as other sensitive data. EPHI certainly was part of that. So what we do know is it was, at least it appears to be, a highly targeted spear phishing attack. If you're not familiar with spear phishing, it's just like phishing with a PH, where you receive an email and it's trying to get you to click on something or get you to download a file, which will then ultimately infect your internal network. So it does look like it was a very highly targeted spear phishing attack. And it does look like it was performed by a well-known Chinese-based hacking group that goes by several names, but they're most widely known as Deep Panda. Yep, that's Deep as in D-E-E-P, Panda. So I didn't make that up. That's somebody else's. But yeah, it looks like they were
Panda.
Yeah, Deep Panda. So looks like looks like they were, like I said, highly targeting with some phishing campaigns. One of the ways we were able to find that out, which I thought was pretty interesting, is you started going back and looking at some of the things that people do with domain names and websites. And there was actually this group, Deep Panda, registered the domain name that looked very much similar to WellPoint, which was Anthem's original name before they changed it in the fall. Right. And it was we11point.com. So if you just look at it, it looks like it says WellPoint. Now, that they use that as part of their social engineering.
Hey, Mike, what is the difference between phishing and spear phishing?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I went over that. So phishing is a social engineering technique that is widely used to cast out and to try a big net to try to collect information or get somebody to do something. Usually it's done via email. Spear phishing is when, instead of just casting that wide net to try to grab as many people as possible, you're actively targeting an organization. So that's what spear phishing was. They were actively targeting Anthem and WellPoint, and the evidence of that, once again, is registering that domain name, we11point.com. So what it looks like happened. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, yeah, no, I started to just kind of interject. I mean, the thing about a good spear phishing account, as you said, it's targeted. Hence, spear is what sort of we mean, but I mean, they can look just like a real email, more so than a typical, phishing kind of campaign where, I mean, they can, with some thought, they can grab stuff off of a website that references internal, operations and make it look so real. It's like really hard to defend against that.
It is really hard to defend against it. Well, we'll talk about some countermeasures here in a minute, but yeah, it's very hard to defend against it, especially with that doctored domain name at WellPoint. They actually had a server up and running called sharepoint.wellpoint.com, or with the ones instead of the L's. So that's that clearly indicates that they were trying to redirect people to websites that they controlled for the purpose of infecting their systems. So they got in with a backdoor like that. They installed some software known as a RAT, R-A-T, a remote administration tool. They were able then to use that RAT to call home to their servers and to start collecting administrative level credentials out of the database that was running on their internal networks there. And in fact,
do we have any idea do we know how long it was running? Like how long they were, gathering this information before it was discovered?
It looks like from the evidence we have so far that the original infection probably started somewhere around April of last year. So almost a full 10 months that it was running on their network before it was discovered.
Wow.
$64,000 question. Could it have been prevented?
That is a very good question, Carol. Thanks for moving us along. Just a real quick aside on that. A lot of people are saying, well, it could have been prevented if they had encrypted their database. And the fact of the matter is that's just not true. Just encrypting that database wouldn't have done anything because they actually captured administrative level usernames and passwords. And if those admins are allowed to view the data, then so are the bad guys. Mm. So
they could decrypt the data, in other words. They
could have decrypted it and viewed it in real time anyway. So encrypting a database like that wouldn't have done anything. But we can talk about you have the new slide up, the defense in-depth approach. And this is really an old security standby that says everything has to come in layers. You start with the very center there, which is your data, what you're trying to protect, and then you move outwards from there. And if you look, one of the more critical things that you can do to help prevent these phishing attacks is awareness training. It's really training the human to be the human firewall, to not click on that link or to really look at that website. and say, well, that looks suspicious, and have a notification capability there to be able to notify somebody within the organization that looks like something scary is going on here. But it really all wraps around, you have your security policy that is a governing body around all of that, and moving out to the perimeter. There are some technologies you can deploy that will help this, but no one technology would have prevented this. You have to do it in a layered approach, and that's what Defense in Depth really is all about.
Yeah. Well, all right, then, it's a good backdrop to get right into the heart of what we do here on HIPAA Chat, which is take questions from our audience. We had a lot of questions in this particular registration round, and I don't think we'll get through all of them, but don't fear if you asked a question in registration or you ask a question live today. Steve and Mike have promised me that they will write you back personally to answer that, and I'm going to hold them to that. So I'm going to start with some of the live questions we got during
if you don't hear from us,
yeah.
if you don't hear back from us, then you can email Carol, and Carol is the enforcer. She'll send Guido out to Mike and I with a ball-peen hammer. So we will really try to get back to
I will make them answer your questions. So I'm going to start with the questions that were asked during the registration, and then a couple of you said that you would be willing to unmute yourself to ask your question live. So look for me kind of chatting with you privately on that. So we're gonna dive right in, and we're gonna start with our first question, which was asked by Robert from Columbus, and that is: are online cloud file storage / sharing services like Dropbox and Citrix ShareFile HIPAA compliant?
That's a great question, and I know Steve often has a response to that from a HIPAA compliance standpoint. So if you want to take that one, Steve.
Yeah, let me talk about it from a HIPAA compliance standpoint. Then I want Mike to kind of maybe take a little more from a technical standpoint. But the answer is that into those specific examples, Dropbox is not. And the other one was Citrix, wasn't it?
Citrix ShareFile.
What's their solution called, Carol?
I think it's called Citrix ShareFile.
In that question?
The asker said Citrix ShareFile. Hello?
ShareFile, yeah. It's the they will. Yeah, I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear us?
Okay, good. Okay, good. Sorry. Yeah, I can hear you. So they will sign a business associates agreement. So at the very kind of first level, that's the first question you ask is, will they sign a BAA? What are their claims on their website? So so Citrix is making a big push in HIPAA, like the base level amount you pay for their service, and most services like it that will work with enterprises around HIPAA is about $100 a month. Box.com is another one, and I'm actually very particularly fond of them. Another one, interestingly now, is Google Drive. Google will sign a business associates agreement, and they're another option. So beyond the BAA question, the technical stuff is a little, Mike, I don't know what your thoughts, if you have general thoughts about just their use generally or other things.
To reiterate, I'm a huge fan of Box.com. I actually I know their Chief Information Security Officer very well, Justin Somani. He's a former Chief Information Security Officer for Symantec and Yahoo, and he really knows his stuff. So I'm really impressed with their architecture from a standpoint of how they're actually separating out the data and not having mixed-use data. And it's highly secure and very well architected.
And they have their auditing capability, I believe, is the best of all the share.
Yeah, their auditing capability is huge.
Yeah, they're
to the degree that they can actually track who received what file when and who opened it, who had credentials, which is all very important if you have to go through a risk assessment for the purpose of a breach notification. You want to be able to actually tell who had access to what, when, and why, and how. And so their auditing capabilities are very strong.
or from an information system activity review procedure requirement, which is a regulatory requirement too. I mean, just generally, you have to have that capability. You need to have some kind of capability to do that. So yeah, theirs is really, I think, the best out there. It's quite good.
Okay.
Hey,
great.
now what about yeah, okay.
All right, so next question, Jeremy from Prairie Village, and I don't know what state that is in, but it sounds like a charming little place. Can you talk about, Prairie Village, can you talk about patient data in a web browser, where it's in memory or cached, and the same for Windows applications, in Windows apps?
Yeah, so let me actually, so this a little bit of, I want Mike to take on the sort of specifics of caching, but one of the things, though, that I will say that I am a fan of, I'm a fan of the use of thin client, and specifically thin client devices, such as Dell, Wise, and other things, because we know there's no data on it. The way those systems are architected, one of the things on an application, like if you're running what's called as a fat client, even if that fat client is designed to save data on the server anytime you hit submit or save, it's usually still caching data, and that's something we have to get at. On the web side, I'm not quite as sure. Mike, what's your take on that?
Well, it depends. Obviously, you want to make sure on any
caching
of the web
data in a browser.
Yeah, obviously you want to make sure that any connection you're connecting to there is secure. It has a little lockbox up in the corner. Or depending on which browser you're using, you want to make sure it says HTTPS. So it is using either SSL or TLS. Preferably, just from a very technical standpoint, we want to see companies using TLS versus SSL because there are some known vulnerabilities in the older models of SSL.
Yeah, and SSL is It's been SSL, deprecated. I think, is on its way down.
Oh.
Yeah, it's on its way out. So TLS is actually what has replaced that. As far as the caching goes, what you have to keep in mind is that even beyond whether it's a web browser or an application, if your computer is infected with what's called a keystroke logger, it doesn't matter if you have a secure connection or not, it's going to record the actual keystrokes that you're typing in. And that is one of the most common pieces of malware out there is the keystroke logger. So that's why it's so important to have updated and patched systems and to have the most updated hardcore antivirus you can get and to make sure you have all of its features turned on because that malware itself is the #1 vector for what's causing the majority of these data breaches.
Wow. All right.
And like even like with Spearfit, like if they used a method like phishing, one of the things that they're commonly installing is a keylogger. So, and Mike, I have a question for you. That someone in the audience may be asking. We said SSL, TLS, and TLS is better, but that's not decided by end users.
That's correct. That's going to be decided by whoever is running the web server. Right, so whether that's a cloud-hosted ERM application, or even if you go to Google, Google, you can actually
or patient portal.
Or patient portal. Yeah. So if your organization is running your own patient portal, then you have some control over that. But most of the time, it's going to be whoever is providing that.
All right.
Is there a way if one of our listeners wanted to find out? Let's say they have a patient portal, let's say it's hosted by their EHR vendor, and they wanted to know whether SSL or TLS is being used. How would one go about finding out what the encryption protocol is that's being used on that web browser?
Sure. If you look at the web browser that you're on, if you look at the web browser that you're on, and say you go to google.com, I'm actually using which browser am I using? I'm using Chrome. So in Chrome, and pretty much always will do this, but you look up next to where it says HTTPS, it has a little, dead ball, or not a dead ball, a little master lock sitting up there. If you click on that, it's going to give you a pop-up window with a couple of options. One of the options is the connection, and if you click on that connection, it'll tell you a little bit about it, like it says, this connection, you're connected to google.com. It is encrypted with 128-bit encryption, and the connection uses TLS 1.2. So that's going to tell you, and that's pretty much standard across the board, no matter what browser you're using.
All right. We're moving on down. We've got, and again, if these are complicated matters, and if you've got additional questions, I will have Steve and Mike's email at the end here. Alicia from Hartford, if we're using a cloud-based EHR, is it truly secure for employees to access from any location outside of the network?
That's a great question.
Truly secure. Yeah.
That is a great question. So once again, we were just talking about web security, right? So the browser security itself will encrypt that data during the login process and as you're viewing it. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to do that from a shared PC at a hotel, like maybe in the business conference center at a hotel. I really wouldn't want to log into that website because the chances of that computer being infected with something are pretty significant. Also, the same is true for if you're using your home PC to do it. We run into this a lot where the network itself, the assets that are owned by the company are pretty secure, but then people are accessing it from their home machines, which are very much insecure. So we've recommended several times to address that with policy, to say that if you're going to be allowed to have access to the system from a remote computer that we don't control, then you have to agree that you will make sure you have antivirus, personal firewall, so on and so on, installed on your system. It's a chance you're taking, but you're also doing that with your bank account too. So keep that in mind.
Okay. Well, I'm going to unmute Laura here and bring Laura online. So stand by. Laura, are you with us? Laura? Laura, you there? Well, Laura, when you get online, just say hello, and we'll be able to get your question asked on HIPAA Chat. All right, so I'm going to move on to Judith from West Liberty.
Hey, Carol?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes.
Hey, this is Steve. I think we're having, I can hear you. I think we are having some technical problems, though. Are you hearing, was Mike kind of fading out a little bit?
No.
And I wonder if I am too. Okay.
Nope,
okay.
You sound great. Nope, it might be on your, with all the storms and all
you heard that?
You sound great,
heard
yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, we heard you
on my
fine.
end. It might be.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. Laura, are you there?
Okay.
She says she's with the speaker. Laura, can you say hello? All right. Well, that might be part of the... Laura's not there. Yeah. Well, chime in when you can. So Judith from West Liberty has a question. Okay. Most secure approaches for transferring PHI outside an owned firewall organization available today. How best to monitor for breaches? Okay, let's see. Most secure approach.
Yeah.
I see. Wanting to know the most secure approach.
Secure way to do it.
An own firewall.
Well, what's interesting? Yeah. I mean, well, one of the things I'd say is that security is one out of probably many factors that might go into a decision to determine how you want to transfer data. Whether you want to use. There are actually two security, what's called file transfer protocols. It's you'll hear SFTP or FTPS. They're both types of secure, but a lot of that's going to be dictated by the kind of data. Is it a one-time thing? Is it something where you're going to be transferring data? Is it, you can look at HL7. So it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all question. But Mike, I don't know if you have some just sort of general thoughts about that question.
Well, and if I'm looking at and reading the question correctly, it says how to best monitor for breaches. So, that's, I guess, the second part of the question, or even a second question entirely. So one of the best ways to monitor for breaches is to deploy some technology that's called DLP, and that stands for Data Loss Prevention or Data Leakage Prevention. But really you have to start even higher than that by classifying your data into appropriate categories, segmenting that data to only have it where it needs to be, and then monitoring for where that data goes. And that's what the data loss prevention technology does. It will actually monitor anytime any specific data is trying to leave your network that you don't want to leave. And certain DLP technologies can actually block that from leaving your network as well.
Yeah. So if you have a staff level person that's downloading a spreadsheet that has 4,000 records on it, a DLP solution potentially would say, hey, this doesn't look right, and we're not going to let you do that. Or sometimes it may not even necessarily have insight into what's on the record. Some of them will, interestingly, but sometimes it's saying, we don't like the way you're getting at this. There's no reason you should be putting this onto a thumb drive. So it's another kind of way, you can, help prevent those kinds of instances from occurring. So that's certainly one option. And in addition to the data classification question, one of the things on the front is making sure that the proper roles and responsibilities of and the access level that goes with that have been set properly. So as an example, you generally don't want end users to be able to run reports within your EHR. And, there might be some certain types of specified reports that you can limit them, but you don't want them to be able to do massive database queries and download, lots of data. That should generally be defined within the function of an appropriate role, such as a database administrator or a report writer, or it may be somebody that's involved with CQM, clinical quality measure. I mean, there's certain types of people where it might be appropriate, but you just don't want to give that to anybody, and that's very often handled through roles, and how that can play into that. So.
Okay, great. I'm going to see if I've got Laura back here on the line for a second. Laura, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yep, some reverb, though.
Okay.
We got reverb. Yeah.
Okay.
Whoops.
What do I do to get rid of that?
I'm not really sure, but I'm going to put you on mute and find out, and I'll get back to you. You stand by.
Yeah, I think if she turns down the volume on her end, that should get rid of that reverb.
If she turns down the volume of the speakers on her end, then that reverb should go away. And then she can ask her question, then turn the speakers back up so she can hear us.
Try that, Laura.
Okay. Bear with me 1 second, please.
Oh, that. Bear with me 1 second.
Is that better?
It's never that. I think it's better. Is it better? I think it's better.
Maybe ask your question very fast.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it's not working. The question that I really want to ask, and then I'll shut up after this, is I do medical coding and billing, and I want to protect patient information. I'm done.
Okay.
All righty.
Did somebody get that? Yeah, did somebody get that? We need an interpreter, a translator.
I got it. She does medical coding and billing, and she wants to know how to protect her clients.
Okay, so billing, like a billing.
She's on the billing side, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, first of all, from a regulatory standpoint, so she would be a business associate. She needs to make sure she's complying with the regulations and doing what the regulations require. And one of the presentations we give in our monthly webinars, which Carol referenced at the beginning, you can find at healthsecurity.solutions.eventbrite.com, is Compliance Essentials. It basically talks about what it means to comply, but that's the start of it, and then that one's is again not a real easy one-size-fits-all sort of question, except looking at what what kind of data, how are you transmitting it, and coming up with appropriate controls. Mike, do you have if thoughts on the one thing maybe, or that could help?
Yeah, there's not a one thing. I mean, clearly, if you're a business associate, you have to be just as HIPAA compliant as anybody else. There's no size measurement there that says just because you're small, you don't have to do everything that a large organization does. It's pretty much the same across the board. So, clearly, if if you're working on your laptop, maybe that's what you're doing as a small consultant. You utilize your laptop as your core business asset. You certainly want to make sure that you have that hard drive encrypted on that laptop. You want to make sure you've got a personal firewall installed that includes intrusion detection and prevention capabilities. You want to have antivirus, anti-malware installed, and that's going to get you a long way toward being compliant and ultimately being secure. But those are some of the the very basic things you want to have running there.
Okay, all righty. Paula from Fort Myers.
I want to say too, just to add. I mean, I think that a general strategy. Hey, can you hear me, Carol?
Yeah, we can hear you.
One of the things I'm just sort of keeping with that is just a general strategy, around, saying what can I do to reduce the amount of data that's on this machine. And so that's, we've had some questions about cloud and other things, but one of the benefits, there are always trade-offs. There are some things that might be negative and positive, but to the degree that you can, look and say, use applications that minimize the storing of data locally, that's, often a good thing. So you could look at something like remote desktop or VMware, Citrix, or as I've already indicated, I'm a big fan of thin client devices are one of my favorite things. Now I think in the context of, Mike's answer was really most appropriate, because if it's a really small one or two-man shop or whatever, probably encryption is your most important go-to solution to protect information that's stored on a device. So.
Okay, great. So Paula from Fort Myers wants a couple of best practices or suggestions for mitigating phishing threats. I know that you guys touched upon training, obviously, understanding what this email might look like, but are there others for keeping those
technical controls?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly technical controls that can help with that. Going back to what we were talking about before, the layered security approach. You don't want to have just one technology. You want to have several technologies to get you closer to 100%. 100% is virtually impossible, by the way. But some of these technologies can get you close. Things like
it's not. It's virtually impossible if you actually want to operate. You can create an impenetrable information security fortress. The only downside of it is that nobody can get any work done. That's not the only little detail. It's like, but if as long as you're okay with zero, like your productivity levels being nothing, zero, nada, then you can actually build a perfect security solution. So.
Yeah,
that guarantees no one will ever. Yeah. So anyway, actually, there's one of my favorite Dilbert character is Mordak, the preventer of information systems, and he said, security is more important than usability. In a perfect world, no one would be able to use anything. And in the last panel, it has a thing. To log in, stare directly at the sun. So it's like very secure, so anyway, that's but you're right. I mean, you have to think about. But sorry, Mike, to interrupt with my Mordak. You were saying what we can do. So.
So from a technology standpoint, just real quick, and then we'll go to the next question. There's email content filtering. There's anti-spam solutions in the cloud. You don't want to use just one provider. You want to try to mix providers. If you have an anti-spam solution on your local computer, you want to use a different one in the cloud so that you get the best of both worlds there.
Layers.
Yep, to have those layers.
Layers. So just sort of a, where did my question go? From a high, sort of 30,000 feet up kind of question, and I just lost it. Hold on. Would like to, again, these best practices, Marge from Detroit, would like to know some recommended best practices for thwarting cybersecurity. Again, you talked about training, going back to your wheel, your layered wheel, but you talked about training, you talked about encryption software, you talk about, file sharing.
Yeah, boy, people, it's like this people. No, people really want the magic bullet, and I understand that. It's like, what is, and I mean, so in fairness too, I mean, you do prioritize, kind of approaches here. It's just really hard to do without knowing context, without knowing what the risks are. But I think we've touched on some of these things already. I mean, and actually, honestly, I'm going to come back. I mean, a question like that is a lot more. It's a lot easier to answer if you've done a risk analysis and you kind of know, what your key issues are. And risk analysis is, even with issues of cybersecurity, is really a critical component to being able to know what layers you need to apply to your situation. But getting back to what we talked about for Marge, I mean, looking at, do you have data on devices? If you do, and especially if they're portable, then looking at encryption. Encryption gets you a lot. But again, it's really hard to ask without knowing the particulars. And then we've talked about DLP as well. I think for organizations need to, this might be a good, I mean, it's a little bit of, but I think it'd be a good place to talk a little bit about vulnerability scanning and penetration testing and kind of how that can play into some of these issues.
Yeah, certainly. So obviously, one of the things we do a lot when we do our risk assessments is we conduct, as part of that, what's called a vulnerability scan. And that happens both inside your network and outside your network. And what a vulnerability scan provides us with, basically a good list of the potential weaknesses that you have within your network and outside your network that a hacker could use to break in, or that a piece of malware could use if it actually gets on your network, and what it could do once it got in your network. So it identifies all those holes and weaknesses, and we call those vulnerabilities. And right now, the technology we use is checking for about 50,000 different potential vulnerabilities on a network.
Wow.
When we run that scan. Now, the flip side to that is what's called a pen test or a penetration test. That's where we get to really have a lot of fun. We get to flip our hat around from white to black. We get to act like a bad guy and essentially try to break into your network for the purpose of getting access to your EPHI. That really goes above and beyond the automated tools that are used in a vulnerability scan, because it's very manually intensive. We're acting just like the bad guys are. We are using the same tools and approach that the bad guys use to try to break in and to test your information security controls, and to ultimately get access to your protected data, which is your protected healthcare information.
The black hat.
So,
yeah.
Yep. No, yeah. We call it gray hat. Okay.
Because we give you the data back. We give you the data back. We don't.
We don't ransom it. Yeah.
It's totally legal, and we're not selling your data or ransoming it or anything. But we're using those black hat hacker techniques to test the security controls on your network.
Got it.
Yeah, I'll mention too that when we do this, they're what are called rules of engagement. So, like, if we run across something that, so with the vulnerability scan, it's like looking for holes. Pen testing is you're trying to exploit the holes. You're literally trying to say, okay, how deep can I go? There's this concept called capture the flag. It's like, it's really, I'm going to sneak in here and do this, and oh, here's a router that's set with the default credentials of admin username, admin password, and we're going to try to get at that data. But there are rules of engagement and around that, and then if we come across something that is a vulnerability that we think is even Mike, this has happened to you, haven't you? You've been in the middle of a pen test and with a client that was actively being hacked by bad guys. I think that's happened to you before.
Yeah, that's actually happened where we were doing a pen test and we were actively trying to break in, and we noticed some suspicious activity on the network that we weren't doing, and it turned out that there was an actual bad guy in the network at that time, actively hacking them and trying to move the data off. So in that scenario, like you talked about, we have some pretty clear-cut defined rules of engagement. At that point, we ended our penetration test and moved immediately into a forensics analysis to try to stop the exfiltration of data.
All right. Ariane from Cincinnati asks, what is the most commonly overlooked vulnerability specific to healthcare?
I'm going to take a stab at this, and I'm going to talk about it in the context of smaller practices. So, and you remember, that layered thing. I mean, small practices often don't have the policies and procedures they need. They don't. In our risk analysis service, we provide, security policies with that. Beyond that, there are too many devices that have data on there that are just, they're prone to being stolen or lost, and they're not encrypted. And then the other area that's surprisingly common for those kinds of clients is insecure backup. So you've got, you may be using tape, you may be using maybe an external drive that you're rotating, and a lot of times those are not being properly secure. The data is not secure, but they're still being rotated off-site. So think about it. You got tape or you got an external drive. It's all your data, but it's clear text. It's like easily exploited if you were to lose that. So, and I actually advise clients, I've said this on a previous show, I'd rather they stopped rotating it before they'd stop rotating it until they encrypt it, and then begin the practice of restart the practice of rotating it. That's a big one we find a lot. But Mike, what about you? What would you say is common ones that you see?
Yeah, I would say above and beyond the most common is passwords, and that's from a couple of different areas.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course, yeah.
Bad passwords that aren't complex enough.
Hosted
Yeah,
passwords.
Hosted passwords, written down passwords, shared passwords. Passwords are.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, biggest vulnerability there.
And also, I would think, is there a frequency issue
bugaboo.
too, like the frequency issue of passwords? Like, should there be this regular schedule of changing passwords, or is it if the
absolutely. That should be in the password policy. I mean, at minimum, it should be done once every 90 days, but I recommend once every 45 days, and cut that in half.
Now, hey, Mike, I'm gonna push back with you on this a little bit.
Here we go.
And I just want to see what you think about it. Yeah, here's like I'm getting out the nunchucks, dude. It's like, but one of the things that's is a concern for me, Mike, is that I think that if you make password policies too restrictive, that they can actually be counterproductive, because people then do start writing them down. And, it's like, in some ways, I'd rather have them have a really good password, like that's lots of digits, highly complex, that doesn't change as frequently as a bad password that changes more frequently. And what do you agree with that, or do you see it differently?
No, I think you've got a very good point there. You don't want to be so restrictive that it causes people to have bad behavior. But one of the things I'm pushing towards in recommendations is getting away from a password and using a passphrase, because that's easier to remember. And what we've actually found out recently, longer is better, even if it's not using special characters or numbers. The longer the password is actually better from hackers trying to decrypt and break that password. So that's why I'm moving toward passphrases. And like I said, 45. I don't think 45 days is too onerous, but I think at a minimum it should be every 90 days. Plus, you don't want to make a password that lasts too long, because the other thing we see is people will use the same password in multiple different accounts.
Over and over.
They'll use the same password for their email that they use for their corporate email, that they use for their corporate login, that they use for their EHR login. And if they're using that same password in more than one location, it's no longer a password.
Yeah, the anonymous attack on HB Gary, they really strongly went after the CEO, and the CEO of this vaunted security company actually had one password across multiple domains, and I mean it was one of the reasons they took him down so hard was because that. What do you think about password vaults?
I like password vaults. I think there's some good ones and some bad ones, but I think in general they're a pretty good thing. But keep in mind, you're also putting all of your passwords in one location, and now you have one point of failure. So if I get access to that,
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's like if you're going to do a password vault, do not make the password to that vault 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because that's not just giving them, that's not like sort of making your key really easily replicable. It's giving them a key to give them a key to the key closet, at your facility. It gives them the key to everything. Yeah, it's a single point of failure. Make sure you use a really solid, password with your key with your password vault. I don't know what you're seeing, Mike, and not everybody can afford this, but I have become a huge fan and would like to see more organizations use single sign-on with multi-factor authentication. Like a keypad with it, because it does two things. It simultaneously increases usability and security. At the same time, I mean, doctors, when they, at a hospital as an example, where they're deploying this, in every hospital I've worked with, this happened. The doctor sees, their neighbor doctor using this newfangled card with a keypad to authenticate into their systems. It's the same card used to get through the door, and they immediately want it. It just dramatically makes their lives a lot easier, because they go from having to remember 8 passwords and all the complexity and the changing and all that to just really needing to remember one that they only use typically at the beginning of the day. And so doctors just absolutely love that technology, and it is a great security, great from a security standpoint. You don't see that very often. But of course, the trade-off is cost. They cost money. So,
and just to explain what two-factor is, in case anybody isn't aware, two-factor means something you know and something you have. So something you know could be your password, passphrase, or PIN. Something you have could be your proximity card that you use to get into the door. It could be a key fob. But that's generally what two-factor authentication means. It's something you know.
Yeah,
and something
your
you have.
Your ATM, which everyone will be familiar, that's two-factor. It's your ATM card and it's your PIN, and so those solutions can be great. One thing we haven't touched on that I'm going to go ahead and throw out. It's probably going to be more applicable for people's personal security than security in the healthcare environment, because you don't see these a lot. But I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. for everybody out there, if you have not already invoked two-factor authentication for your banking sites, for your Google account, and do it today. And that means that if you get onto a computer today to go into your bank that you've never been on, it's going to require, there are different ways to do it, Google Authenticator or texting, but it's going to send you a text saying, hey, enter in this code, and once you get used to them, they're actually not a hassle. Most people have their phone with them all the time, or if you use Google Authenticator, there's an application. You can even use that when you don't have, if you don't have any kind of link, you can. It doesn't need any kind of phone link. And I just want to encourage everybody on this today. For your critical accounts, you need to use two-factor like today. I mean, they're free, and they really do improve security a lot. So, yeah.
Somebody on the call wants to know what antivirus software. There's a lot out there, obviously, and I guess they're getting worried about the one they are using. Not really sure why they're worried about the one they're using, but they're worried about their antivirus software
system. Yeah.
I mean, traditional antivirus, as we know it, is dead. The Symantec CEO made that announcement last November. So what that means is...
Yeah, I'd say definitely on life support. I'm not quite ready to have people yank their antivirus, but Mike's about to explain. Mike's about to explain why this is.
Yeah, I worked at Symantec for a number of years. We used to, when I was there, we used to claim that we were the best antivirus in the world, that we had a 95% efficacy rate. That means we could detect 95% of the bad stuff. Well, that still left 5%, and we were the best at that time. Now, that was, going on 10 years ago now, and I can tell you that at that point in time, there were about 5,000 new viruses coming out per week. Well, that number has increased by a factor of 5. So, even if you're still at a 95% efficacy rate and you've got 25,000 new virus signatures coming out every week, you're going to miss a lot. So that's what I mean by traditional basic antivirus is dead. Now, what we're looking at is we're really moving toward what we call total endpoint protection. And that's where on your endpoint, be it your laptop, desktop, or mobile phone, you have antivirus, anti-malware. And anti-malware, a lot of people get confused. Malware and viruses are not necessarily the same thing, and they behave differently. And so you have different technologies to detect different types of attacks there. So you have antivirus, anti-malware, desktop firewall, local firewall, or some software calls it a personal firewall, which includes intrusion detection and prevention, so it can actually block known attacks. And you have one of the big areas of concern that you want to have, and that's endpoint protection, is preventing you from going to bad websites that will actually detect bad code and nefarious code that are in websites that is trying to infect your computer. So you want to have that as well. So if you have those 5 things, you're leaps and bounds ahead of basic antivirus. And there's even more you can layer on there as well. But having those basic 5 things is absolutely required to prevent getting a local infection.
And as you both mentioned, training too.
And actually, one of the reasons that I was going to just say one of the things that was that plays into this, kind of antivirus is dead, is that it's not just that there are a lot of new antivirus, viruses coming on, but it's that they have gotten extremely clever at hiding themselves. They'll actually, these files often are encrypted. They'll encrypt the virus file and make it so that it can't be read by the typical antivirus, and then they clearly have some clever manner of decrypting and deploying that. It's like, and between that and you know, a lot of the other approaches, it's just become exceedingly difficult to do that. So if that's your, and we're coming back to layer, that's your kind of one layer, you know, you need to look at differently. Mike, do you have a vendor that you kind of like the most? I mean, you know, that's good at bringing all these things to bear?
Yeah, I do, Steve. I have two vendors, really, and you can open that up to a whole category. I am very much a fan of utilizing what's called enterprise class antivirus technologies or enterprise class endpoint protection, not using the prosumer or consumer versions of these technologies. So with that being said, you know, I would go, it's a little more money, but you can purchase single user license, for example, for Symantec's endpoint protection or McAfee's endpoint protection. That's the enterprise grade. I'm not talking about like Norton or Vast or something you might use at your home PC today, or that might come with your home PC for free. I would use the enterprise grade technology because that's what's going to give you the most protection.
Yeah.
It's funny. One of the folks on the call today said, you know, just getting back to this initial discussion of Anthem where we started. You know, they're a $60+ billion company. Obviously, they have a big IT security budget. You know, if they were hacked, how are we expected to cover our bases with a fraction of that kind of budget? You know, it's like if Anthem could be hacked.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it is something that is a very legitimate concern, and, you know, so one of the things, I guess there are a few things. One is, even in our risk analysis approach or whatever, there's risk-adjusted risk analysis. It's like, and, you know, so it not only makes sense, it's almost baked into all the frameworks that, and then by frameworks, let me back up. There are multiple published security frameworks that basically say, hey, here's what you need to do to, you know, secure your network. Here's a framework that you can apply, and they're all scaled based on the size of the organization. So that kind of comes into play. And so a company like Anthem has a huge volume of data, and you should expect that when, you know, why did you rob the bank? Well, because that's where the money is. But one of the interesting points is, well, why did you rob that bank? Well, because it was easier than the one next door to it. You know, you want to, you know, you don't have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than the guy you're with. And so part of that comes into play. But I got to tell you, Mike, and I don't know what you think, but this is exceedingly difficult business. I mean, it's hard to do it. It's hard to do well. A targeted, persistent attack is just, you just need to have one person with the right credentials to give up their information, and it can lead to bad things. I don't want to.
A couple of points on that, just real quick. And you said it, Steve. Bigger is not necessarily better. You know, I can't comment directly on what Anthem's IT security budget was or is. I'm sure it's gone up. But, yeah, you know, I can comment on the industry standard. And the industry standard is, you know, IT budgets have increased. Now, this is general IT, have increased significantly over the last years. And security, as a percentage of IT spend, has gone up, but it's gone up from 2% to 5%. Well, that's great. That's more than a double increase, but it's still only 5% industry-wide of the total IT budget, and I just don't think that's enough. There's still just not enough money being appropriately spent as a percentage of the IT budget to secure your assets.
Well, we have about a minute to go, and before we sign off, I just remind everybody how you can contact Steve, how you can contact Mike. I will get this recording out and their emails again to everybody, and be sure to check out their monthly series of webinars at healthsecuritysolutions.eventbrite.com. We want to thank our sponsor, eFax Corporate, for helping us produce and host HIPAA Chat. And we'll get the word out on our topic for next month. And thanks for patience on some, I think they're probably weather-related, TD, technical difficulties. But we managed to get through it. And I think we'll have to figure out what we're going to do for next month in the month of March.
Yeah, and we really, please contact us. We know you may have questions. You'll find that Mike and I both, we really are pretty responsive to emails. Anything we can do to help, we would love to do. So, please don't hesitate to contact us. So
great, and I even without my prodding. Thanks, everybody, and if you're in cold weather, stay warm, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.